So I'm David Bailey. I'm a Senior Director of Technical Solutions Sales at Veritas. And a couple things I'm going to talk to you about is what we do in terms of what we believe makes it a lot easier for customers to be able to address cybersecurity threats, but from a different angle and a different approach. And as we go through this, hopefully that becomes apparent to you. So to tell you a little bit about myself, I was in the federal government for 23 years. I was a U.S. Army officer. I did logistics operations, cybersecurity, and special operations. And I've been in industry about 18 years, covering a multitude of topics. So as we advance through this, hopefully I make it clear to you how this all applies. So Veritas is an enterprise data services company. And how does that apply to cybersecurity? Well, as a couple of panelists have mentioned earlier, there are several different models, and they all mentioned it. But there are things like managing your data, protecting your data, having a recovery plan as part of your cybersecurity model is incredibly important. One of the constructs that I have found that is actually very helpful to me to describe that is DHS's CDM model. I don't know if you guys have seen that. But they have data protection as a layer. It's actually the core of the model when you look at the continuous diagnostics and modeling model. It is very fundamental to that. It's interesting in that the way we look at it at Veritas is very different than a typical cybersecurity guy might look at it. What we tend to look at when I was a cybersecurity guy, we tend to look at the protection layer on the outside in terms of how do I look at threats coming in, how to prevent threats from coming in. I didn't always necessarily worry as much about, well, once they got in, because they will, what do we do about the data that's been affected? That's the operations guys. So as time has moved on, cybersecurity and operations have become much more tightly joined, mainly because with the evolving pace of innovation, operations has to be dynamically updating capabilities to do better citizen services, for example, or to be able to provide something new to their workforce. So they have to constantly evolve. It's not static. All the while mitigating threats coming from the cybersecurity layer and what's acceptable risk, which is a very variable thing depending on the organization and depending on the type of data or systems that you have in place. So challenges with managing cyber risks today are a multitude. A lot of it in today's environment has to do with organizations moving to the cloud. It's not just a government thing. It's commercial, state and local, hospitals are all evaluating moving to the cloud, which means now their data is no longer in tight control inside of their data centers. It's spread out among multiple vendors or multiple SaaS vendors, such as Salesforce, Microsoft Azure, Office 365, Amazon Web Services, maybe an IBM Cloud, which in one of the states I know they're using a version of IBM Cloud. So the data is not just sitting on-prem where you have tight control. Those boundaries have now been extended, which can result in data fragmentation or information fragmentation or systems fragmentation. So you have to be able to incorporate that into your plans as you move forward. So when we look at it from our perspective, I thought I removed all the builds. There are four basic areas that create a risk profile. Many more data sources, many more data locations, many more types of threats. We mentioned the couple of threats earlier. They're evolving all the time. I can't even keep up with them. But there's various ones from the simple phishing attempts, which are human interaction based, to automated attacks from nation states or from organized crime that are trying to get the particular data. Now, to me, what cybersecurity really is all about, or what cyber threats are really all about, or data threats are all about, is about two basic things: breaking and taking. I'm going to break your system, or I'm going to take something because it's valuable to me. Now, what that can do is cause a great amount of disruption. And there's also the fun factor. I'm not as worried about the fun, the people that do it because they find it to be fun. It's really the ones that are the most dangerous are breaking and taking, right? They're looking to do something to either disrupt you or to take something from you that's of value to them that they can exploit. So as we move through these, the other thing that's becoming more and more apparent that's also attributable to the taking piece are more regulations like around privacy. So privacy to the individual is very important. Like California's passing legislation. We've had the legislation in Europe for some time. HIPAA has been around forever, which is around patient data privacy, in my opinion. those regulations as they come out, if that data is sitting in the wrong location, you don't know if the proper controls are on it, so it also presents a risk, right? For the commercial industry, it can be a financial risk if you have privacy information now sitting in the wrong location and it's not in the right cybersecurity perimeter. And the last thing, of course, the need to optimize is somebody brought up earlier about funding. There's not unlimited funding to increase cybersecurity in an unlimited way. And if you really kind of accept the fact that you're never going to be able to get to a risk zero or a perfect cybersecurity posture, there's always going to be a way for somebody to get in, whether it's insider or outsider, or whether a system goes down or malfunction, some malware in a piece of software. What you need to be able to do is optimize your data structure so that you can recoup costs from your own infrastructure so you can apply it back where you need it, whether it's in operations or in cybersecurity to protect your data. And I'll show you some of that as we go through, or I'll talk to it a little bit. So in the case of rising cyber threats, I'm not confident I can recover from a ransomware attack. $40 million lost by one company in one event. Did you guys, did everybody here read about Baltimore recently? The localities down in Florida, right? It's a real thing, it happens. We actually, in polling the federal government, also had some administrators and CIOs share with us that it's a concern in the federal government as well, who's very well funded with a lot of cybersecurity. So it is a big deal. Now, what we basically say, and what I did here is, this is my great slide work. This gentleman here, he's one of my compatriots at Veritas. His name's Brian White. He was down doing a similar type of presentation around ransomware, around one of our products. But what I really liked about it in this particular graphic, and encapsulates what I see as being the biggest problem with ransomware, is that you need to have a plan. So in some of these instances, there was no plan that if you got compromised or something happened to the data, well, how are you going to get it back quickly? Now, years ago, we talked a lot about DR and COOP, or when I was in the Army, we talked a lot about it, especially after September 11th, about planning for a major disaster. But as we moved into these other constructs, sometimes we assume that the cloud vendor is going to do it for us, or we assume that the SaaS vendor is going to do it for us, and that's not always the case. And in some cases, if you don't have a comprehensive plan, you end up with pockets that are not where they would need to be from an organizational perspective. So you need to have a plan, a comprehensive plan, and you need to be able to exercise that plan on a regular basis. Now moving on to the next one. Whoops, I went the wrong way. Sorry, I hit the wrong button. I can't protect my technologies with my current solutions. About 75% of the people responded. This has a lot to do with extending into the cloud and making sure that your data protection strategy, from our perspective, can extend into those new constructs. We believe we do that very well. Actually, we're a leader in that space. We've had, we have like when the world went to VMware in the data center, we had some of the first patents, probably hold the most patents of anybody in our space. As we move to cloud, we support a plethora of cloud vendors to support our customers to be able to allow them to do that, both on legacy and in future infrastructures, which is going to bring me to my next point, is around when you have, as you're adopting new technologies, you still have to often keep your older technologies in place. Why? Well, either it's a mandate that you have to, or that you have to, it's either going to be a mandate that you have to, or the data is actually trapped until you can move to the new infrastructure. So you're going to have a whole plethora of technologies in your space. So as we look at it, the increasing cost, shrinking budgets is a big deal. The rising threats and regulations, snowballing complexity, which I just mentioned, around you have a plethora of systems in these data centers spread over ever larger areas. And then evolving technology is you need to be able to deliver citizen services in the case of the government, increased levels of citizen services on multiple types of devices now. That presents a real challenge. So you have both the old legacy stuff plus the new stuff that you're having to incorporate. So what we suggest is that you standardize on a platform, not standardize on a product, standardize on a platform. A platform and a product are very different things. A product is a kind of like a one-shot widget that does one specific thing. To us, a platform is an extensible capability that you can apply to adapt to your infrastructure over time, as opposed to just, here's a product to do this one thing, here's another product to do another thing, here's another product to do a third thing. Because what I see happening with that is that it becomes loosely aggregated. You end up with those gaps that I spoke about before, and you end up with tool sprawl is one of the other detriments. So when you have tool sprawl, you end up with a lot of overlapping tools that do kind of the same thing but not quite, which also results in an additional cost. And one of the important things is to make sure it doesn't compromise on enterprise grade. So what I've seen sometimes is a tool gets adopted, especially when you look at it from a product perspective, a tool gets adopted, but it doesn't extend into your environment. The three pillars that we use in our platform are API, and availability, protections, and insights is a construct of how we develop our platform and how we look at customers' problems when they present that to us. Now, one of my guys in Colorado likes to call it IPA. He switches the things around for me because he has a lot of customers that prefer beer, but API is our basic construct. So what that means, availability, in this case, what it means is that no matter what your application is, it should always be available to you, especially if it's mission critical. In the case of one of our customers, it's a giant customer, it's the US Army, they had a problem. They spent 6 months trying to migrate to a new infrastructure so they could move to the cloud. 6 months. It was a financial application, could not be down. End of year processing was coming up for the end of the fiscal year, could not be down. But they had to move to the new infrastructure because they could not go to the cloud to meet their mandates. So they came to us, they were already using our product, but they didn't know is that we had the capability to actually do that within our product without having to sell them anything new. And we went in on a Labor Day weekend and migrated them in 3 days. 3 days to get them to a new infrastructure so they go to the cloud. They had already tried for 6 months using point products to try to do the same thing and failed. Now, if you've dealt with the large system integrators and formalized congressional programs, 6 months is a long time to wait, and it's a lot of money. To be able to do it in 3 days with 2 consultants over a holiday weekend is phenomenal. And that's what I meant about the extensibility of the platform in a specific example. Protection, this is actually core to what we do. In more common vernacular, you think of a backup and recovery. Sounds a little less sexy, but protection is really protecting your data no matter where it sits and allowing you to be able to get your data back in the way you need it when you want it. Now, why is that important to cybersecurity? Well, if I can take you back to a known good time, recover you to a known good state, in a known good location, that's pretty important. So if you have a main data center that's infected, while your cyber guys are trying to figure that out, I can actually fail an application over into the cloud and then reinstantiate your operations in that location, which may not be affected. So you can do all the forensics and everything you need in the main data center. Moving on into insights. So in order to recover costs, like I mentioned earlier, you need to be able to know what your data is. There's a tremendous amount of data value locked up in what we call dark data. Dark data is that data you don't know anything about. It's that attic where you continue to shove stuff. No one knows quite what's up there, but it's up there. It's taking up space. It's taking up a cost. Eventually it spills over into the garage. And then it spills over from the garage to a storage unit. But you just keep keeping it, and nobody gets rid of it because you don't know what it is. So what we do is we apply a logic layer, looks at the data, provides metadata tagging so that you can make policies. Once you can make a policy, you can begin to apply automation. Once you're able to apply automation, you can now apply governance. Now that governance may be a privacy law, a change in legislation, or organizationally you could say, given a certain cost profile, I need to move this type of data to this location because it's more cost effective. Or, better yet, I need to take this kind of data because it's now a risk to my organization and get rid of it. Privacy data and individual privacy is an example. or data that has no more value, you're just keeping it. Because as you keep it, you got to store it, back it up, retain it, have someone administer it, and it's just better to get rid of it if it has no more value. So basically, kind of in summary, while we believe it's important and while we think it resonates, is that 10 of the top 10 financial institutions are our customers. The top 10 telco companies are our customers. The top 10 investment banks and healthcare organizations. And they do include federal government organizations. I just don't call them out by name, but I think it's important. And that's why I think the message is pretty relevant. That being said, thank you very much. I'll give you back 3 minutes.